March 1945, Western Germany. The war was burning toward its end, but the dying flame was still deadly. Every village, every ridge, every bridge the Americans took came at a cost in men, steel, and fire. The 9th Armored Division was advancing east of Remagen, pushing through shattered farmlands and half-frozen forests. The Rhine had been crossed. The Germans were desperate, outnumbered, outgunned, but far from finished. Among the American infantry scattered through the fields was Sergeant Sean Newman, a 27-year-old gunner from Iowa. He'd been fighting since Normandy, Omaha, St. Lo, the Ardennes. A quiet man, lean, with a habit of taking apart any weapon he got his hands on. He wasn't a hero type, just a soldier who fixed things when no one else could. On the morning of March 10th, Newman's platoon reached the outskirts of a small German village called Birkhof. The fog was thick, rolling low over the charred ground. Their orders were simple: hold the position until armor support arrived. But as usual, things didn't go according to plan. From the tree line came the sound every soldier feared, the rumble of panzers, deep, slow, mechanical thunder. Their spotter confirmed 4 of them, likely Panzer IVs supported by infantry armed with MG-42s. The Americans had little left. One 57mm anti-tank gun blown apart by a direct hit and no bazooka rounds. Just rifles, carbines, and a handful of grenades. Newman stared at the twisted remains of the anti-tank gun. Its barrel was cracked in 2, the breech jammed with dirt and shrapnel. Around it lay crates of unused 57mm shells, live, perfectly good, but useless without a gun to fire them. He looked at them for a long moment. Then something sparked in his mind. He'd seen farmhands back home fix broken machines with fence wire and hammer blows. He'd watched his father fire a pipe cannon at coyotes using black powder and nails. "If the gun's gone," he muttered, "we'll just build a new one." The men around him laughed. "You're nuts, Newman," one said. "You'll blow yourself to hell." Newman didn't answer. He just started scavenging. He found a length of steel pipe from a destroyed German half-track, a broken wheel mount from a Jeep, a bent axle. He welded and hammered with the heat from a truck engine, using rifle oil to keep the metal from seizing. He stripped down the shattered breech of the 57mm gun and fit it to the pipe's rear end. It wasn't pretty. Hell, it wasn't safe. But it was something. Hours passed. The ground trembled again. The Panzers were closing in. You could feel them before you saw them, those heavy treads grinding through the mud. Newman's hands were black with soot as he bolted the pipe to a makeshift frame. His squad covered him, trading bursts with German infantry in the distance. The smell of cordite and smoke filled the air. By dusk, the cannon stood ready. Ugly, crooked, the kind of weapon no manual would ever describe. But to the men watching, it was a spark of hope. Newman slid a single 57mm shell into the rough-cut chamber. He took a deep breath. "If this goes wrong," he said quietly, "don't stand too close." The first Panzer appeared through the haze, its 75mm gun searching. The MG-42s opened up, sending tracer fire slicing across the field. Newman pulled the improvised trigger, a length of cord tied to the firing pin. The cannon roared. The ground shook. The shells screamed across the distance and missed. The Germans laughed over their radios, mocking the single, desperate shot. Newman reloaded. The second round fired cleaner. It struck short, throwing mud over the Panzer's front hull. The third shell hit, dead center. The explosion tore through the tank's frontal armor, setting off its fuel cells. Flames erupted, rolling upward in a tower of orange light. The German line stopped, but there were still 3 more Panzers. They responded instantly. The lead tank turned its turret toward the ridge. A shell screamed overhead, exploding behind Newman's position. Dirt and rock rained down. The gunner beside him was thrown backward, ears bleeding. Newman stayed steady. He adjusted the pipe's angle by hand using a wrench as a lever. The recoil had nearly torn the mount apart, but it still held. He loaded another round, high explosive, short fuse, and fired again. The second Panzer took the hit on its right tread. The explosion sheared the track clean off. It lurched sideways, smoke billowing from the engine. Its turret spun wildly, then stopped. Another round from the homemade gun struck its side plate. The tank erupted in fire. 2 down. German infantry advanced now, firing MG-42 bursts through the smoke. Newman's men returned fire with Garands and BARS. Shell casings littered the mud, the air thick with gunpowder. The 3rd Panzer pushed forward using the wreckage as cover. Its cannon flashed, sending a 75mm round into the farmhouse beside them. The blast collapsed the roof, showering Newman's position with debris. He crawled back to his cannon, coughing. The barrel was glowing red hot. The recoil spring had snapped. It didn't matter. He loaded another round and braced his shoulder against the frame. He didn't have time to think. He fired. The cannon kicked like a mule. The shell flew true. It struck the Panzer's lower glacis, the weakest point, and blew the entire front plate open. The turret lifted off like a lid. The blast wave rolled across the field, shaking the ground beneath them. 3 down. The last Panzer reversed, smoke covering its retreat. Its commander shouted orders in German, the voice cracking through static. Newman reloaded again, hands blistered, eyes stinging from smoke. The final round was an armor-piercing shell marked with a red band. He whispered, "Let's finish it." He fired. The shell streaked through the haze and hit just below the turret ring. A perfect strike. The explosion ripped the Panzer apart. Its turret blew off in a fireball, landing 30 yards away. Silence fell. For a moment, no one moved. The battlefield was nothing but smoke and flickering firelight. Then one of the men whispered, "He did it!" Another shouted, "4! He got all 4!" The laughter that had followed Newman's crazy idea was gone, replaced by awe. When reinforcements arrived hours later, they found 4 burned-out German tanks in a row and 1 improvised cannon made from scraps and courage. Engineers studied it, couldn't believe it had worked. They called it an improvised field gun. But the men who'd seen it fire called it something else, Newman's miracle. In the days that followed, word spread through the division. The gunner who built his own cannon, the man who turned junk into salvation. Soldiers came to see the weapon, to touch it, to believe it was real. Newman didn't talk much about it. He just said, it wasn't the gun, it was the men who held the line. But in truth, his invention had changed the fight. His squad held that ridge until Sherman's rolled in. The village fell the next morning. Historians later wrote that the weapon was technically impossible. The pipe couldn't have withstood the pressure, they said. The angles were wrong. The firing pin shouldn't have worked. But on that day in March 1945, theory didn't matter. What mattered was will, the refusal to give up, to let fear or logic dictate survival. Newman's homemade cannon never fired again. It cracked apart after the final shot. Its barrel warped beyond use, but its story lived on, told in foxholes and bars, across campfires in a defeated Germany. Some said it was luck. Others said it was divine providence. For Sean Newman, it was simple. "We were out of weapons," he said years later, "so I built one." The war ended weeks later. Newman returned home to Iowa with a limp and a medal he never bragged about. He worked as a mechanic, raised a family, and rarely spoke of the day he turned scrap metal into a weapon that humbled German armor. But among those who served beside him, the memory never faded. The sound of that first impossible shot, the disbelief, the fire, and the silence that followed. Because in a war defined by machines, sometimes victory still came from a man with nothing but his hands, his nerve, and a little American ingenuity. As the last rays of daylight faded over that German field, The wrecks of 4 Panzers still smoldered in the distance, black silhouettes against a dying sky. The smoke curled upward, carrying with it a legend born of desperation. And somewhere in that fading thunder, you could almost hear a laugh, a quiet, tired laugh from a soldier who'd done the impossible.